Hi, my name is Cale and I live in Tennessee with my brother. We both have a great love of auto racing. Since we were kids, we have been very active in outdoor sports, and last month we were invited to participate in a competition that was held at one of the most important racetracks in our city. We were very excited about this competition, but things did not turn out exactly as we expected, or as I expected, since my brother got second place. But I, on the other hand, suffered a terrible accident while trying to overtake another driver in the penultimate curve. I was lucky to survive, thanks to the fact that I was taken care of immediately. But there is something my family doesn't know until now, and I don't think I will ever share it with them. But I feel I need to tell someone, so here I am with this story. In that accident, I severely injured my left arm, broke my leg, and almost broke my neck. I also got several bruises and cuts all over my body. In addition, I hit my head very hard, which caused significant bleeding. My brother rushed me to the nearest hospital, which was in a hilly area near the racetrack. We didn't have time to return to the city, so I was treated in this small hospital center called El Descanso. Don't ask me why, but that name has always seemed strange to me for a hospital. The fact is that my brother admitted me there and stayed in a nearby hotel to take care of me during my recovery. The small hospital was located on the side of a mountain, and my room had a very nice view, which was quite comforting. After 2 days in critical condition, I finally stabilized. I had no idea what was going on around me because I was heavily sedated and in a lot of pain for most of the time, so everything I just told you, except for the beautiful view from my window, was told to me by my brother later. On the 3rd day of my hospital stay, I woke up in the middle of the night, lying on a bed with an oxygen mask, plastic tubes, and various devices attached to my body. It took me a few minutes to get a good understanding of where I was, so I looked around to try to get my bearings, and that's when I saw a middle-aged woman sitting on the couch. As I looked up, I realized it was a nurse. She was reading a magazine and hadn't realized she had woken up. "Water, I need some water, please," I said in a weak, raspy voice. The woman put the magazine away and walked towards me. It was then that I could see her face as she leaned over me. The woman was probably in her late 40s and was wearing very flashy makeup, which scared me a little. In my moment of confusion, she said in her high-pitched voice, "Welcome," then slowly lifted my head and helped me drink water from the glass, but before I could say anything else, I passed out again. The next morning when I woke up, I actually felt much better, especially when I looked around and saw my brother George at my bedside with a smile on his face. "I thought I'd lost you this time," he said, taking my hand. I smiled back and said, "You're not getting rid of me that easily." We both shared a laugh and then started talking, more him than me, because my throat still felt a little dry. George told me that our parents were very worried at home, but that he had handled everything on his own, and fortunately everything went well, although I almost didn't tell it this time. We were chatting and joking when a doctor and a nurse came into the room. The doctor said, "Mr. Richardson, you are a true warrior and your brother is just like you. He has given us his full cooperation, and I can basically say that he is the one who really saved your life." I felt very fortunate at that moment, but my eyes went to the nurse in the corner and I realized it wasn't the one from last night. My brother got up and went to the doctor. He told me that in 4 or 5 days I could be transferred to a hospital near my house. I was lying in bed thinking about everything that had happened when the nurse from earlier came to change my saline solution. I said in a weak voice, "Can you thank the nurse from last night? She helped me a lot, but I was so weak I couldn't thank her." The nurse looked at me with a confused face and said, Okay. Although, it's hard to identify nurses without knowing their names, so if you could tell me what her name is, I'll surely give her your thanks." At that point I realized that I hadn't actually asked her name last night, so I felt somewhat uncomfortable. The next day, when the nurse brought me lunch, she left without me being able to say anything else. I slept a while longer, and when I opened my eyes and noticed the blue sky from the window, I realized that I had slept all night. Then I looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was 8 p.m. I was thinking about calling someone when I heard a familiar voice. It was then that I looked towards the door of the room and saw the nurse from the night before standing there, smiling at me. Her lips, painted a very bright red, made her look really creepy. She said, "How are you feeling today, Cale?" I smiled a little nervously and replied, "Quite a bit better. Hey, sorry, I forgot to thank you last night for helping me with the water." She didn't let me finish my sentence and told me that she had nothing to thank me for, as that was her job. Then she slowly walked into my room and sat down on the couch, picked up a magazine, and started reading it, just like the night before. I just lay there without saying anything else. After a while, another nurse came into the room. The nurse began to arrange my bed and set a table on it, then looked at me and said, "Now it's dinner time, Mr. Rochardson." The second nurse continued working on her own while the night nurse sat on the couch quietly and read her magazine. I guessed she was probably the head nurse, and that's why the visit. I assumed that she used to visit patients to monitor whether or not they were being well cared for. I thought this was very nice of her, and the truth is that up to that point both the facilities and the care at the hospital seemed excellent to me. I ate dinner quietly and in silence, and during all this time none of the nurses spoke a word to each other. After a while, the youngest nurse left the room and the head nurse stayed on the couch reading the magazine. That's when I asked her, "What's your name, ma'am?" This time the nurse put the magazine aside and looked at me. She smiled at me and I noticed she had a crooked tooth. She replied, "My name is Claire, but everyone calls me Nurse Belford." Then she got up and left the room. I found her behavior a little strange because she used to come to my room at night and just sit there and read a magazine, but I didn't think anything of it and just settled down to sleep. I woke up from my sleep a few hours later and saw her sitting on the couch again, staring at me. Whenever our gazes met, she used to smile in a very creepy way, and that was actually making me a little uneasy. One morning, the junior nurse came with my breakfast like every day, and I told her how Nurse Belford always visited me during the night. But her reaction was a bit strange. She spilled the juice on the food tray, as if I had said something scary to her. Then she looked at me with her eyes wider than usual, and I noticed some beads of sweat on her forehead. Then she said in a low voice, almost in a whisper, "How do you know about Nurse Belford?" Her question confused me a little, but I replied, Because she comes to visit me almost every night, and last night I asked her name, and, well, she told me." The truth is that I find it a little weird that she never comes during the day or is her watch only at night. Instead of answering that question, however, the nurse asked me, "You mean you actually saw her inside your room?" I then replied in an irritated tone, "Of course, what kind of question is that? She was here when you came in with dinner last night. Didn't you see her sitting on the couch?" This time the nurse went from a frightened face to a panicked one, and then she said to me, "Listen to me very carefully. This is your last night in this hospital, so you must do as I tell you, okay? If Nurse Belford comes to visit you tonight and asks you to accompany her somewhere, don't go, but for anything in the world, okay? Promise." Now I was worried. "What's this all about?" I asked her, somewhat confused. She then replied, frightened, "Nurse Belford committed suicide last year in this hospital. Some of us still see her wandering the halls at night. Previously, she would sometimes approach some young patient and ask them to come with her, and we have found 3 dead patients whose deaths were not natural at all. People say that she had an affair with a man younger than her who was a patient in this hospital and that he broke her heart. And since then, her tormented spirit tries to take revenge on all the young people who come here." My head was literally throbbing with pain hearing that. I couldn't believe that all this time I had been talking to a dead person. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave this hospital before morning, and I had already put everyone in enough trouble. So I decided to sleep through the night. But the nurse was kind enough to stay until midnight, but she had 2 other patients to attend to, as it was a small hospital. So she finally left. She told me to lie down on my bed and keep my eyes closed. After a few minutes, I fell asleep, but at around 3 in the morning, I heard a squeaky voice calling my name. "Cale, open your eyes. I have a surprise for you." Hearing it gave me goosebumps and my heart started beating like a wild horse. I realized it was Nurse Belford, but I didn't open my eyes. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps coming out of the room, but I kept my eyes closed and alert for a while longer until I finally opened my eyes. The room was dark, but the moonlight coming in through the window gave a clear view, and after looking in several directions, I ascertained that there was no one in my room. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned to the left side of my bed, thinking it was finally all over. But as soon as my head turned to the left, I saw Nurse Belford placing her head on my bed and looking at me with her evil, angry eyes. Her face now looked swollen, bruised, and misshapen, and there was blood dripping from her lips and mingling with her hideous red lipstick. But undoubtedly the creepiest thing was her eyes, which were bloodshot and almost completely out of their sockets. The sight of her was absolutely frightening and terrifying. Then he said in a horrible voice, "You think you can ignore me like that, Cale? I was the one who took care of you, and now this is how you treat me?" I was completely paralyzed with fear. I wasn't even able to articulate a word, as every muscle in my body was rigid, and my heart felt like it was in my throat. But the most terrifying thing was about to happen. She opened her mouth, and from there a cloud of black flies started to come out. The sound of those flies made my ears ring. I felt like the flies were going to suffocate me and that I wouldn't live to see the sun in the morning, so I screamed as loud as I could. I literally felt like life was slipping away from me in that scream. Apparently, my scream echoed throughout the hallway, and I don't know how long after. The doctor on duty and the junior nurse ran into my room and turned on the light. And then the creepy image of Nurse Belford faded away. Seeing me in shock and shaking, the doctor thought I was having some kind of panic attack. But the nurse looked at me with her eyes very big and full of fear, and although she didn't say a word, nor did I, she could clearly imagine what had caused me to be in that state. The nurse stayed in my room until the next morning when my brother finally arrived. I didn't say a word to her about what had happened. I just went home in silence, but even now, when I close my eyes, I panic at the thought that when I open them again, I will see Nurse Belford sitting next to my bed. My name is Anna. I have been working at the state hospital as a nurse for more than 15 years, and, to be honest, I think hospitals are probably the only place that bluntly represents the reality of life and death. When a patient recovers, we medical assistants feel joy in seeing them alive and ready to move on with their destiny on this plane, while when a patient dies, we grieve with their family as well. With time and experience, nurses train to deal with the most difficult situations. But when this incident happened, I was a new nurse at our hospital and had only been working there for a couple of months. I was working in an emergency room where we used to encounter anything and everything. A naive teenage girl slit her wrists, obsessed with her first breakup. A man who got involved in underground racing and had a car accident that left him a quadriplegic. A guy who got into street fights and had physical injuries that left him unrecognizable. When I say everything, it's everything. Cases like this were common for us, but this case will never leave my mind. There was a boy named Armando who was admitted for a suicide attempt. When his parents brought him to us, he was covered in blood and horrific injuries. According to the eyewitness account, Armando was sitting in the park with his friends when suddenly he got up and ran towards a speeding royal van. Undoubtedly, the van hit him very hard, and he was left with a very serious head injury and multiple fractures and lacerations to his body. When he was admitted, his parents were sobbing and crying the whole time. Seeing them, it just broke your heart. A unit of 3 doctors and 3 nurses, including myself, did his surgery. But unfortunately, due to massive blood loss and shock, Armando went into a vegetative state, that is, a state of complete unconsciousness with some eye-opening and periods of wakefulness and sleep. The boy was about 14 years old, so everyone at the hospital felt extremely bad about the sad fate of this boy and the pain his parents were going through. After the surgery, I was assigned to watch him. His thin body was lying on the bed all the time. His eyes were always open and still, staring at the ceiling all the time. The only time I felt he was alive was when he closed his eyes to sleep after dinner. I remember his random eye movements used to scare the hell out of me sometimes. One night I was sitting next to him after giving him his dinner and read him a story. This is done in order to stimulate the cognitive side of his brain. His eyes remained closed the whole time, but I soon realized that he had fallen asleep, so I got up and turned off the lamp near his head. I was about to leave when I remembered that I left my phone on the table near him, so I went back and turned on the table light to find it, and just then I saw that Armando's eyes were wide open and staring at me in the middle of the night. I must say that being face to face with such strange and unusual eye contact was certainly something that scared me. However, these types of events happened often, one of those mysteries that always haunted my mind. Like the reason why this healthy, athletic, handsome, and seemingly popular among his friends 14-year-old boy tried to take his own life. Slowly, I began to notice changes in Armando's motor skills. The doctors were really happy to see such a quick recovery in him, and assured his parents that maybe in a few months, Armando would regain consciousness for good. His parents were happy with this news, and his mother came to visit him almost every day. One day he was changing his medicine chart when 3 children the same age as him came into his room with an adult man of average height. He was wearing glasses and was dressed in a formal manner. From his appearance, I assumed that he was a teacher from his school and that these boys were his friends. The guys talked to Armando and wished him a speedy recovery. Then the teacher took his hand, and as soon as he did, I noticed a slight increase in Armando's pulse rate. Then this man said in a soft and loving voice, "Oh, Armando, we all miss you so much. Get well soon. We are waiting for you." My heart was squeezed to see how his friends and teacher appreciated this boy. Within 10 minutes of his departure, Armando's heartbeat began to increase rapidly, and within 5 seconds his body began to shake like a rabid dog in bed. He was having a seizure. I immediately called the doctors and they rushed the medications and fortunately managed to control the situation. All night I stayed by his side in the room, watching him closely and very attentive to any change in his heart rate. After that day, we had to keep our eyes wide open, even had to stop visiting hours for a while, as another shock or seizure would have caused a heart attack, so we had to take pretty rigid measures. After a week, we finally allowed visitation again. His mother came to visit him and asked us to let her spend the night in his room, even though this was against hospital rules. But this was a poor mother going through a situation that no mother should have to go through with her child. So for once we had to bend the rules for humanity. I decided to stay with him too, as usual, in case something unexpected happened like the other night. There was a small couch in the room. Mrs. Palmer sat on it and I sat on the chair near the bed. Around 2:30 a.m. I got up to get some coffee. I peeked out of bed to see Armando as usual and his eyes were closed. Miss Palmer was also passed out on the couch and I decided not to wake her. The coffee machine is down the hall, so I walked quickly and pressed the button. The hot coffee had just started pouring into the cup when suddenly I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from Armando's room. A shiver ran down my spine. I dropped the cup, spilling the hot coffee on the floor, and immediately ran to Armando's room. I grabbed the doorknob and turned it to open the door, but try as I might, it wouldn't open, and I realized the scream coming from inside was from Mrs. Palmer. She was screaming in terrible pain. "Mrs. Palmer, why did you lock the door? Please open it. What's going on in there?" I couldn't wait any longer and called the doctors immediately. The doctor called the maintenance staff, and one of them opened the door with a spare key. As soon as the door opened, we witnessed a scene like something out of a horror movie. Armando had broken the window of this fourth-floor room with his plastered hand and had also hit his mother, who was bleeding profusely from her face and nose, but still clinging to her son tightly, screaming, "I won't let you jump, not Armando, please." He was going crazy and was throwing punches and kicks at her like a rabid dog, trying to get to the window to jump out, saying the most obscene things I have ever heard come out of a teenager's mouth. The medics ran to him and grabbed him. He was kicking in the air while screaming expletives at the top of his lungs. While the medics were trying to get Armando under control, another nurse took Mrs. Palmer away to treat her injuries. The scene unfolding in front of my eyes was so chaotic I was frankly in shock, forgetting my duties for a moment, until I heard, "Anna, come here and help me with the injection." Hearing Dr. Stanley's voice brought me back to my senses. Definitely the incident of Armando waking up from a vegetative state and going into an extremely violent state left the whole hospital terrified. Once the incident was under control, immediately the doctors from our mental health team were called in to treat Armando for suicidal tendencies, and because he showed episodes of anger and violence, we had to keep his hands tied so he could not hurt himself. His injuries were still at a critical stage, so we could not move him to a mental institution. However, the police arrived and, with the psychiatrist present, did a full interview to unearth the reason why Armando wanted to end his life so desperately, and only after 4 or 5 sessions did he finally open up. Armando claimed that his teacher, Mr. Blass, physically abused him the day before he attempted to take his own life. I couldn't believe that this was the same guy who came to visit him that day at the hospital. I now realize why his pulse increased with the presence of that man. The cops finally arrested Mr. Blass, but the man claimed he was innocent, and that Armando was the one who persuaded him to have intimate encounters. However, the cops found highly inappropriate photos of Armando taken by his teacher. The boy testified that Mr. Blass blackmailed him that he would publish the images on the internet if he tried to tell anyone. Armando also said that this man molested another boy at his school, and a boy named Matthew also testified against Mr. Blass. We all celebrated the day this disgusting man was jailed. After another week, Armando was released from the unit. That day, his parents were doing paperwork at the counter while he was sitting in the wheelchair, so I went up to him and said, "You've been a brave boy. Don't you ever get hurt for someone else again, okay?" But Armando looked at me with a face of despair, and then I said, "Hey, you're finally going home to your people. You should smile, dear." Now he looked at me with no expression on his face and thanked me for everything. A moment later, his father came and took him to the car. I was about to head to the office when I heard a phone notification and saw that there was a phone on the table nearby, so I picked it up and almost unintentionally read a strange text. "I have already done what you told me. The day I heard you blackmail Mr. Blass into giving you grades and nominating you for the scholarship, I knew it was you I was having an affair with. I was disgusted to fall in love with a guy like you. But we broke up. Now why are you also blackmailing me with my private pictures you took? I want them back now." Before I could ponder what the hell that meant, I heard a sound behind me. "I'm sorry, Nurse Anna. Armando forgot his phone. Can I have it back? Please." Mrs. Palmer stretched out her hands to me, and my heart sank in fear. I handed her the phone. She took it and started to walk away. I walked towards the exit and noticed Armando sitting in the back seat and typing on his phone. which he had just received from his mother. The car engine started and he looked at me one last time from the window, smiled from ear to ear in a mischievous way, then winked at me and made a love and peace symbol with his fingers in an almost mocking way. That was the last time I saw him, but to this day, I am baffled by everything that happened and I really don't know what to think. This happened to me a couple of years ago. My story goes more or less ashy. I suffer from chronic pain due to a back injury that I've had 3 surgeries on. Most of the time I deal with it and live my life. But every few years it really gets to be too much. I go into these bad states of depression and stop talking to my family and anyone. I usually become a hermit when this happens. My family worries a lot that I am going to hurt myself, and I understand that they do because a couple of times in my depressive stage, I have gotten to the point where I really made an attempt on my life. This has not happened again, but even I sometimes fear my own thoughts. When this happens, my relatives send me to a psychiatric emergency room where they usually put me at a 5150. For those who don't know, that means a 3-day wait. None of this has really bothered me before. I have good insurance, so the place they send me to is basically like a hotel where you can't have shoelaces. The worst part is when they admit you and you have to walk across the room where all the other patients stare at you as you walk in, and in my case, usually the stares are not so friendly. You see, I'm a man just over 6 feet 2 inches and weigh about 285 pounds. I have tattoos covering both arms, and since I've been depressed for months, my beard and hair were out of control at the time, so I looked like some kind of Hell Angels biker, so I never have a problem with people trying to mess with me. The truth is, my appearance doesn't do me justice because I'm a friendly guy. But unless you know me, you wouldn't believe it. Since I've been through this a couple of times before, I know essentially what's going to happen. They take all my information, make sure I don't have any shoelaces or anything with strings attached, and then show me to my room. The room I was assigned was co-ed, but in reality the roommates can only be of the same sex. It was also low security, which means everyone here is supposedly non-violent. My only problem with this place is that they have people like me, meaning no history of mental illness, who are just having a hard time, mixed in with all different levels of patients. Fortunately, in the last 2 visits here, I have never had a problem with anyone and was hoping to get through my 3 days uneventful and finish my treatment. I was sent to my room, and the nurse told me that my roommate's name is Tom. She also started saying something like, "Tom is a really nice guy and blah blah blah," which of course made me a little tired, but we were in a mental institution. Everyone here has some issues. These rooms are basically like any low-rent motel, except maybe a little bigger. There are 2 beds, a bathroom which annoyingly doesn't have a full door. There's also a desk and each patient has their own dresser. It was 3 p.m. and Tom was sound asleep, which isn't that strange, since they all take different medications that knock them out or cause them to be able to have strange sleeping habits, so I don't think anything strange. In fact, after spending hours in the ER and a couple more to check in, I'm pretty tired myself and decide to fall asleep, which I do almost instantly. I have no idea how long I slept, but when I wake up it's completely dark outside, and only the small floor light that I can't turn off is on. This is to give some illumination to the room and the patients can't manipulate it. Suddenly, I turn to the side and see that Tom was now fully awake and sitting up in his bed. He says, "What's up, man?" "It's Brian. I would have said hello earlier, but you were sleeping." I replied quizzically, "Didn't they say your name was Tom?" I was trying to be as friendly as possible, as it's easier to get along with everyone in places like this. He replied, "Yes, earlier. I was a bit tired too. I try to sleep as much as possible so I don't have to interact with any of the demons." This should have been a giant red flag to ask for a different room, but Tom was much smaller than me and they search you from head to toe when you first walk in, so I had no reason to fear him. Rather, I decided to have a conversation with him about these demons he was talking about, which I found out were all the nurses and doctors. After talking to him about this, I told him that I was still very tired and needed some more sleep, so he said, "Well, it's really nice to finally have a human companion as a roommate." I took this as a sign that he was okay with me, and that I didn't have to sleep with one eye open. I woke up early the next morning for breakfast, since I hadn't eaten in 24 hours. After I sit down to eat, Tom comes out and sits next to me. Then we start chatting, and besides referring to nurses and doctors as demons, he seemed pretty normal. I mean, we chatted about normal things for a while until he suddenly stopped talking and started looking at someone behind me. Then he said, "Ella, that's Jessica. She's an angel." I turned and saw a very attractive girl who looked to be in her early 20s, maybe even 18 or 19. She walked by and greeted Tom and everyone else sitting in the dining room. She was one of those social butterflies who goes out of her way to be super nice to everyone, and when I looked back, I noticed he was looking at her too much, so I snapped my fingers in front of her face. "Hey man, don't scare her," I said. Tom gave a very confused look, as if I had said the most absurd thing in the world to him, and got very quiet after that. Honestly, I didn't think much of it as I had to deal with my own. The rest of the day was the usual in a place like this. You have to go to meetings, talk to your doctor, take your medication, but most of the time you're idle and bored. The TV has like 4 channels. Even if one of them was HBO, it was a bummer, so I spent most of my time reading books in the living room. While I was reading a book, Jessica came up to me, introduced herself, and started asking me all kinds of questions about my tattoos. She seemed like a really nice girl, and just like me, she was basically a normal person who was going through a hard time. In her case, she just had a lot of anxiety, which was giving her panic attacks, mainly since she just started college and really couldn't deal with the pressure very well. We ended up talking for a couple of hours, and I didn't even think about it until afterwards, but Tom was walking past us again and again. A lot of people were hanging around this place to pass the time, so I didn't really think anything of it. But later, I learned that he was burning a hole in the back of my head the whole time. After talking to Jessica for a while, I told her I was going to take a shower before dinner, and we'd catch up later. Like I said before, the bathrooms in this place only have half doors. Picture those old Western saloon doors, so when I'm done, I can see Tom's legs under the door. I said, "What's up? Do you need to use the bathroom?" "I'll just be a minute. I just need to change." He didn't say anything and just stood there. I was starting to get a little freaked out as hearing him wheezing on the other side, and his silence was just weird. So I say, "Dude, you need to back up because I need to get out." But nothing prepared me for what came next. Tom started yelling, "You're looking at me, you're Satan, you're Lucifer." He would say this over and over again. I was going crazy at this point, I thought. If I open the door and beat the crap out of this guy, I'll be the one getting my ass shot and I'll be put in the quiet room. But I don't know what else to do. Even though I was screaming as loud as I could, it didn't seem like the nurses were around. The bedroom doors in this place are very thick, so I was pretty sure it was because if some of the patients screamed in the night, they didn't want them to wake up the other patients. After what seemed like an eternity to me, but really must have been about 2 or 3 minutes, Tom finally stopped and left the room. That's when I was able to get out of the bathroom and get dressed. And immediately after that, I sought out a nurse to tell them what just happened. I have no idea what they told her, but they immediately put me in a different room. I didn't see him at all for the rest of the night, but I was really scared. No one had ever yelled at me or cornered me like that in my life, and I couldn't sleep at all that night. Since I had no watches, I had no idea what time it was, when suddenly I hear his voice from the main room where the nurse's station is. Where is he? Why doesn't he go back to sleep? It was Tom, and he was using the same tone he had when he was yelling at me in the bathroom. I opened the door a little bit so I could hear the nurse talk to him. You'll see him during the day and you can talk to him. Now go back to bed. But for some reason he seemed desperate to see me. But I have to see him tonight. It's an emergency, he told the nurse. This went on for another 2 minutes before security finally arrived. I heard a scuffle, but there was no way I was going there to look at what was going on. I could still hear him screaming, but I couldn't make out what he was saying, and he finally started to fade away. I assumed he had been escorted to the quiet room that was on the opposite side of the room. Needless to say, even with him locked in, I stayed up all night. Morning came and my doctor was already there, which I found very strange as I usually only saw him well after dinner time. He calls me into the interview room to talk to me. He basically asks me about all the interactions I've had with Tom, and I went over everything with him. When I was done, he tells me that I don't have to worry about Tom anymore, because he's been transferred to a different hospital. I've lived here all my life, so I actually knew about the hospital they sent him to, and it's pretty rough. It's kind of a place where they lock you in a room most of the day. I felt kind of bad because I knew he thought I was trying to steal his angel or something, and he was just mad at me because of a misunderstanding. But whatever. It was also nice to know that I was no longer going to have to punch some poor guy in the face for scaring the hell out of me. I finished my stay and actually felt much better about everything. My pain was being managed better, and I was ready to stop being such a hermit. Then my grandmother came and picked me up. She hugged me, helped me finish gathering my things, and said, "I think we're ready to go." But the doctor was there again, very early, and he was giving me a look that had me a little worried. Honestly, I thought they were going to make me stay longer. Once again, I was taken to the interview room, and this is where they told me what really happened that night, and they didn't want me to know until I completed my treatment. It turns out that night Tom came out again and again asking the nurse when I would be back. The nurse kept telling him that she would see me in the morning and did not tell him that I had changed rooms. Apparently this went on for hours before he finally started screaming about it. That's when security arrived, moved him to the isolated room, and gave him an injection to incapacitate him. The nurse contacted Tom's doctor and told him about the situation. Tom's doctor suggested they move him to the medium security wing upstairs until I left. But when they went to get his belongings, they found a 7-inch piece of metal that he had broken off a table in the TV room. That room has cameras and also has windows where you can see the nurse's station. So I guess he waited until they stopped watching and worked on it until he broke it. I'm 99% sure that asking to change rooms is the only thing that saved me from being stabbed to death in my sleep that night. The doctors thought the same thing I did. That's why they sent him to that other hospital. Since he never actually attacked me, he was not charged with any crime, and I have no idea how long he was held. But I will be a happy man if I never meet him again. I work as a staff member in the morgue of a hospital in my city. 6 years have passed since then, but I still have horrible nightmares about it. I was 22 years old at the time and somewhat new to the field, but I was still very aware of the mental impact caused by this type of work. Residing 12 hours in a morgue is not very entertaining, that's for sure. In the beginning, I was almost always assigned to day shifts. But after working there for a year, my supervisor asked me if I would be willing to fill in for the night shift colleague during his vacation. I accepted the shift to impress my higher authorities and was given a new schedule. I was assigned the night shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for 15 days. The first 3 days went as usual, but I must say that at night it felt really creepy. I often wandered around the morgue. Sometimes I used to visit the emergency room, which was just above the morgue. One night I was sitting in my cabin and writing reports, just when a colleague of mine called me to the emergency room. After I got there, I learned that a patient in cabin number 3 had just passed away. The man was in a really horrible accident. I saw 2 or 3 doctors coming out of cabin 3. Their white jackets were soaked in blood. These I was instructed to take the corpse to the morgue, and the autopsy would take place the next morning. By this time I had seen enough corpses, but when I entered the cabin, my heart stopped. Wide-eyed, heart racing and legs shaking, I saw a completely mutilated corpse lying on the bed. There was blood everywhere, flesh gushing from the cuts on his legs and hands, but that wasn't the scariest part. When I noticed the man's face, a shiver ran through me from head to toe. His head was looking at me with his mouth wide open. The man was staring at me. His eyes were cold and dead, but for a moment I felt the man blink. Just at that moment, my colleague patted me on the back and I jumped with shock. My colleague said, "Come on, Jake. What are you waiting for?" I said nothing and just started with my work. I mounted the corpse on a gurney and headed towards the morgue, then got on the elevator, and I swear that for the first time in my life I felt uncomfortable inside an empty elevator with a corpse. After reaching the wasteland, I buckled the back cover and once again that gruesome face came out. I put the body inside the vault as quickly as I could and returned to my cabin. I sat down and started writing the reports. I don't know how long I spent with my work, but a sudden sound broke my concentration. I heard footsteps outside as if someone was walking down the hallway. I got up and left my cubicle. The room where the bodies are kept lay at the end of the hallway, and I saw that the doors were closed and the hallway was completely empty. I was walking towards the main room when I suddenly felt someone walking behind me. I turned around, but no one was there, so I blamed my stupid head for imagining all this. The main room was perfectly fine. Everything was in its place. Only the door to vault number 3 was wide open. This is the vault where I kept the man's corpse a few hours ago. I approached the vault feeling the same shiver as a while ago and took out the stretcher. The man's body was still lying on it, but this time his mouth was closed. Not only that, a strange smile appeared on his face, and again I felt as if he was looking at me with his dead eyes and smiling at me. At that moment I said to myself, "That's enough for today, I'm going home." I planned to call my supervisor and make up a story about feeling sick. I was near the exit of the main room when I heard a sound behind me. I turned around and saw the corpse coming out of that vault like a creature from hell. His whole body was covered in blood. His eyes were even wider now, as if they were going to pop out at any moment, and he was staring at me. I couldn't move. I was completely paralyzed as I continued to witness this horror in front of my eyes. Suddenly, the man came out and stood on the ground. Blood was dripping from his body and the whole floor under his feet was red with blood. I said in a panicked voice, "You're supposed to be dead." But the man laughed in a very low, creepy voice and replied, "You know what the best part of being dead is? You don't feel anything anymore." I couldn't believe I was face to face with a living corpse. I was about to scream when the man ran towards me. I can't explain how he did it, but it was as if he broke through like the wind and stopped right in my face. His dead eyes were right in front of mine, and I swear I don't know how I didn't do me in my pants. I didn't know what to do then, but an idea came to my mind. I asked him, "What do you want? Please let me help you." The man was now staring at me. I was about to ask him who he was, when suddenly the elevator door opened and I turned around. Then I saw my colleague from upstairs coming towards the main room with some doctors. He said, "Jake, you're still here. There's hardly any work here today. You could have left earlier today." I looked back at the vault and it looked like nothing had happened. There was no sign of blood or that man. Feeling my legs starting to give out, I started walking to my cubicle. But before I went in, I said to my colleague and those doctors, "I don't know why, but I feel like there was some other reason behind this man's death." He didn't just die because of the accident. They all looked at me with surprise, but before they could ask, I went inside, grabbed my bag, and went home. The next morning, I got a phone call from a colleague. He said, "Oh my God, Jake, how did you do it? I know it would have been on the autopsy report anyway, but how come you were so sure?" I didn't understand what he meant at first, so I asked, "What are you talking about?" My colleague replied, "Man, the body recovered from last night's traffic accident. Traces of poison were found in his stomach. Doctors say he was poisoned before he got in the car, and now it's a criminal case. Cops are all over the hospital." I started sweating like I was melting. That meant it all really happened. It took me time to deal with the fact that not only had I experienced a supernatural occurrence, but I had also talked to the spirit of a dead man. From that day on, I never saw the ghost again, neither that one nor any other. I guess the fact that justice was done made it finally rest in peace. That's what people say happens in these cases. The truth is that this incident will remain forever in my memory as the most terrifying thing I have ever lived. I am an internist and I have been practicing for more than 15 years. And if I can say anything, it is that taking care of patients is not only a job, but also our responsibility. But not all patients are the same. When I was young and new to the profession, I worked in a small hospital in a rural area of my town. It only took me a few days to get used to the workers and patients. There were 4 other physicians there, and we all reported to the head of our department, Dr. Schneider. This woman was a hard person to impress, no doubt, and to be honest, all of us doctors were terrified of her. Not a single mistake could go unnoticed by this woman. Like any rookie, I wanted to prove myself, so I put a lot of effort into my work. I started taking a lot of night shifts. Since I lived alone and away from my family, I didn't mind staying at the hospital most nights. All the patients called me Dr. Morgan, and there were patients of various ages, but I especially remember a girl named Tanya, who was probably the youngest patient in the hospital at the time and was already there when I arrived. Anyway, Tanya was a lovely child. She often wandered the halls and talked to the other patients, but she was always alone. One evening, I was going to do my usual rounds and was walking down the long empty corridor, when suddenly I heard 2 people talking in a very low voice. It was late and all the patients were supposed to be asleep by then. I followed the sound and it was coming from room number 201. When I opened the door and turned on the room light, I found Tanya standing near the patient's bed. She smiled at me as if nothing. Curiously, my sudden appearance did not startle her. All she said was, "Hello, doctor." "Morgan." I greeted her back and said, "Tanya, it's past your bedtime. What are you doing here?" "Nothing, I just came to say goodbye to George," she replied. George was the 201st patient. He had recently had a major operation and was a bit delicate. Although Tanya seemed calm to me, I noticed on George's face that he was somewhat frightened and extremely pale. I thought Tanya's arrival might have surprised him, so I said in a soft voice, "Honey, you can't wander around at night like that. Come on, let's get you back to your bed." Then I looked at George and said, "I'll send Nurse Martha in for a quick checkup. She'll give you a pill to help you sleep. You need to rest." I then escorted Tanya to her room, to which she went without a word. This little encounter didn't bother me at all, until the next morning when I went home around 4 o'clock after finishing my night shift. It was my day off, so I slept all day and the next day I went back to work. That night, as I was walking by room 201 to see George, I saw another patient sleeping in his bed. I looked at a nurse walking down the hall and said, "Excuse me, where is George? He was in this room." "Oh, you mean the patient who was in 201?" she said. "Certainly," I replied. "Oh, he died yesterday, doctor. As you must know, he was already suffering from cardiovascular disease, and while he seemed to be recovering well, surprisingly, he had a heart attack yesterday. Dr. Owen signed his death certificate. You can ask him. He will be able to give you all the details." The nurse walked away, and I stood in the hallway, puzzled and somewhat surprised. Suddenly, something strange caught my attention. I remembered when I asked Tanya what she was doing in George's room, and she said she came to say goodbye to him and just said, "Goodbye." But why goodbye? She was supposed to say good night, wasn't she? I went to Tanya's room. She was sitting on her bed and coloring some drawings. Without wasting a second, I asked her, "Tanya, why did you go to George's room to say goodbye? Shouldn't you wish him good night?" Her face changed color. She hesitated, saying, I said good night." "You heard it wrong." Suddenly, she looked behind my shoulder as if someone was standing behind me and looking at her. I turned around immediately, but no one was there. The cleaning staff arrived and started a little later and began mopping the floor. Tanya started coloring again, and still feeling intrigued, I went back to work, but I couldn't concentrate on my work. This unusual thought kept bothering me. Why did Tanya say goodbye to George? Did she know he was about to die? A week passed and I almost forgot about it. But one night I was making my usual rounds, walking down the second floor hallway as usual, when I saw Tanya leave room 706 and slowly walk down the stairs. Room 706 recently took a patient with a severe head injury. I walked in and saw that the woman was awake. "Who is it now?" she asked, then looked at me and said, "Oh, it's you, doctor." I nodded my head and asked her, "How are you feeling?" "I'm feeling a little dizzy, doctor," she said. Did someone come in before me?" "Yes, a girl came. She said her name is Tanya." I immediately asked her, what was she doing here? "Did she say anything to you?" She replied, "Yes, she was a sweet girl, but I think she said it wrong. I guess she meant to say good night, but instead she said goodbye to me. Weird, right?" My heartbeat quickened. I put the patient back on the bed and returned to my room. Deep in my heart, I knew what was coming the next morning. She passed away. I had the strong feeling that Tanya had an uncanny ability to know when a patient's time had come, but I couldn't tell anyone about it because no one would believe me. There was nothing I could do because she wasn't harming anyone. Just a little girl saying goodbye to patients whose deaths were near. After 2 more incidents like this, I couldn't hold back. I went straight to the front desk, to Candy, and asked her how long Tanya had been here. She looked at me and said, "Who is Tanya?" she asked quizzically. "The girl from the intensive care ward. Don't you see how she sneaks into the patients' rooms? I don't know why, but I feel there is something very wrong with this girl." "What are you saying, Dr. Morgan? We don't have any patients named Tanya. No child patients have been admitted to the hospital at this time. Are you all right?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What are you saying?" "I've been talking to this child for the past few days." "Check the intensive care nursery record," I urged. "Morgan, please come to my office." I turned around and saw Dr. Schneider standing behind me. I followed her into her office with my mind still in disarray. After we entered, we sat down and she sat down in front of me. Then, in a low voice, she asked, "Did you see Tanya? How does she look, Morgan? Is she happy?" I didn't answer her question. Instead, I asked her, very confused, "What's going on? Please tell me what is going on. Candy just said there is no one here by that name, and now you are asking me about this girl. What the hell is going on?" Dr. Schneider couldn't control her tears. She started crying terribly, and I didn't understand anything. After crying for a while, she looked at me and said, "The week before you joined here, I took her to work. Her father was supposed to come pick her up. I was working while she was wandering the halls playing on her own. Then she started playing on the stairs and somehow her legs slipped and she fell from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor. We admitted her to this hospital due to her immensely critical condition, but she died. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I felt the ground beneath my feet being swept away and my heart stopped. Tanya is dead. My God." I stood in her office, speechless, horrified. Miss Schneider said that a nurse had also seen her at night wandering these halls, but she didn't believe her. However, now I was sure she was still there. I continued to work at that hospital for almost 2 more years. But strangely enough, I never saw Tanya again. However, several of my patients throughout that time reported having been visited by her, and as you can imagine, none of them lived to tell the tale.